Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to Right Side Up. My name is Mike Taglavia. We're going to have, part of this is going to be a tough discussion because over the weekend there were a couple of, I'm going to call them terrorist attacks. We know one of them definitely was, and I'm talking about the terrorist attack in Bondi Beach in Australia, where I don't remember exactly how many, somewhere between 10 and 15 people were killed by two men using bolt-action rifles, repeatedly reloading, because the police apparently were paralyzed by this incident. So we're going to talk a lot about the Second Amendment in this show here today. First thing I want to cover, just as a reminder, if I can get my computer to work for me here. Let's see. I just want to remind our listeners, our Vermont listeners, Article 16, right to bear arms, standing armies, military power, subordinate to civil. That the people have a right to bear arms for the defense of themselves and the state, and as standing armies of time and peace, and as standing armies in times of peace are dangerous to liberty, they ought not to be kept up, and that the military should be kept under strict subordination to and governed by the civil power. That's Article 16 of the Constitution of the State of Vermont. All right, now we're going to go here and see if I can find my other window here. The Second Amendment of the United States Constitution. It was ratified on December 15, 1791 as part of the Bill of Rights. The amendment's text states, "A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." I'm going to repeat the end of that. Shall not be infringed. And I say that because lawmakers love the word shall and shall not. When they're trying to make a law have teeth, where there's a penalty. Well, the problem we have now is lawmakers nationwide, including in this state, don't like or respect the Second Amendment. There are always bills to restrict your Second Amendment rights, your Article 16 rights in the state of Vermont. And they should be thrown in the shredder. Shall not be infringed is very, very plain. It's very simple. It's very specific. Your right under the Second Amendment is something you're born with. It's your birthright. It's a statement that the government shall not restrict your right. And this is the insurance, in my view, ladies and gentlemen, for the rest of the Constitution. So I want to get into some of the mess that we were given by the past administration. And the reason I want to do this is because, well, some people are going to say, well, Mike, you're going off on a tangent. You're supposed to be talking about Vermont politics and things that are affecting you locally. Well, this does. I would argue with anybody that this does. I would remind you that we have the Swanton sector of the border on the northern border of Vermont. So we are definitely not leaving territory that should definitely be discussed on this show. We're talking about the safety and security of not just American citizens, but the citizens of Vermont. So I want to go a little bit deeper here. Let's see what I can find. I want to go to, let's see, crimepreventionresearchcenter.org. John R. Lott Jr., I believe, Let me see. Scroll. John R. Lott. Yes. Okay. We've referred to this website a few times here on Right Side Up, but I want to go over this. Concealed carry permit holders across the United States for 2025. And they did, this is just December 8th, 2025. Concealed handgun permit report. Let's see. After peaking in 2022, the number of concealed carry permit holders across the United States has declined for the third year in a row. The total now sits at 20.88 million, representing 2.7% drop from last year. A major factor behind this ongoing decrease is the widespread adoption of constitutional carry laws. And thankfully, ladies and gentlemen, here we are a constitutional carry state, which is really wonderful. Following Louisiana's implementation of permitless carry on July 4, 2024, 29 states now allow residents to carry without a permit. As a result, 46.8% of Americans, roughly 157.6 million, now live in constitutional carry states, with 67.7% of the land in the country, roughly 2.57 million square miles. Although no additional states enacted such laws last year, the broader trend remains unchanged. Unlike gun ownership surveys that may be affected by people's unwillingness to answer personal questions, concealed handgun permit data is the only real hard data that we have, but it becomes a less accurate measure as more states become constitutional carry states. Among the findings of our report, last year, the number of permit holders fell by 0.59 million to 20.88 million, the third consecutive annual decline. The total had previously peaked at 22 million in 2022. The primary reason for the decrease is that the permit numbers tend to drop gradually in constitutional carry states, even though it's evident that more people are legally carrying. 7.8% of American adults have permits. Outside of the restrictive states of California and New York, about 9.3% of adults have a permit. In 15 states, more than 10% of adults have permits. Utah has slipped below the 10% mark this year. Indiana has the highest permit rate at 22.7%, followed by Colorado at 19% and Pennsylvania at 16.2%. 5 states now have over 1 million permit holders: Florida, Georgia, Indiana, Pennsylvania, and Texas. Florida is the top states with Florida is the top states with 2.38 million permits. 29 states have adopted constitutional carry for their entire state, meaning that a permit is no longer required. Remember, shall not be infringed. Because of these constitutional carry states, the concealed carry permits number does not paint a full picture of how many people are legally carrying across the nation. Many residents still choose to obtain permits so that they can carry in other states that have reciprocity agreements, but while permits are increasing in the non-constitutional carry states, they fell in the constitutional carry ones, even though more people are clearly carrying in those states. A survey we conducted with McLaughlin and Associates in 2023 found that 15.6% of general election voters carry concealed handguns. In 2025, women made up 28.5% of permit holders in the 14 states that provide data by gender. 7 states had data from 2012 to roughly 2024-2025. And permit numbers grew 106.1% faster for women than men. 3 states have detailed race and gender data for at least 2 decades, show remarkably larger increases in permits for minorities compared to whites. In Texas, black females saw an 8.6 times greater percentage increase in permits than white males from 2000 to 24. Oklahoma data from 2002 to 24 indicated that the increase of licenses approved for Asians was slightly over 7 times the rate for whites. North Carolina had black permits increase twice as fast as whites from 1996 to 2016. From 2015 to 2021, 24, and 25, in the 4 states that provide data by race over that time period, the number of Asian people with permits increased 277.8% faster than the number of whites with permits. Blacks appear to be the group that has experienced the largest increase in permitted concealed carry, growing 321% faster than whites. Concealed handgun permit holders are extremely law-abiding. In Florida and Texas, permit holders are convicted of firearms-related violence at 1/12 of the rate at which police officers are convicted. Like I said, Crime Prevention Research Center.org is a great place for a lot of data on guns, gun violence, and other violence compared to violent crime committed with firearms. Now, I want to, we have a little bit more time here, so I want to go into one other thing. I want to, for those of you who don't know who Joe Kent is, I want to introduce you to him. This is from his X profile. Father of 2 amazing boys, husband, retired Green Beret combat veteran, Gold Star husband, and director of the National Counterterrorism Center. Okay? And I wanted to introduce you to him because if I can manage to make my little electronic devices work for me here, I am going to play for you something that's by the director here, by Joe Kent. If I can actually make it work. Let me see if I can make it work here. And for some reason, hold on. Here we go. Hold on.
We've made significant progress under President Trump's leadership. We have the jihadis of ISIS and Al-Qaeda on the run in Iraq and Syria, thanks to the decisive action and the strikes that we've taken there recently since President Trump took office in January. However, we have a persistent threat from the individuals that were allowed into this country by the previous administration. The number one threat that we have right now, in my view, is the fact that we don't know who came into our country in the last 4 years of Biden's open borders. What we have identified is alarming, and I want to share that with you today. We just recently put out a warning of the heightened risk of terrorist attacks posed to the homeland by terrorists pretty much of all stripes, but in particular from ISIS and from Al-Qaeda. NCTC has been crunching the numbers and going through the sheer volume of known and suspected terrorists that are in the country that came in under the Biden administration. So far, NCTC has identified around 18,000 known and suspected terrorists that the Biden administration let come into our country. These are individuals.
Well, I just want to stop for a second, ladies and gentlemen. We're probably going to wind up having to finish some of this audio in the next session. 18,000 known and suspected terrorists that are in this country thanks to the failures of the previous administration. That would be Joe Biden's administration. 18,000. Now, we've talked about known and suspected terrorists crossing our northern border in the Swanton sector and the northern border in general because, like I said, Right Side Up has covered this over the past couple of years. And it's not just the northern border in general, but the Swanton sector. So we've seen this happening. And we know that some of them have come across our Swanton sector border. So let's get back to the audio here.
Who under normal circumstances would never be allowed to enter our country because of their ties to jihadi groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Yet the Biden administration not only let them into the country, and in many cases facilitated their entry into the country, just like the entry of the Afghan terrorists who committed the terrorist attack here just before Thanksgiving, killing one of our National Guard members and wounding another.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to come to the end of the segment here, so I'm going to finish up the segment here. Sorry about that. And we'll get some bills paid, and we'll listen to the end of Joe Kent's testimony before Congress. You're listening to Right Side Up. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to Right Side Up. We're talking Second Amendment, self-defense, Homeland Security, and it's all been sparked by these two incidents, one in Australia and one at Brown University, where multiple people were killed. Apparently, the assailant at Brown University yelled something, but they haven't declared what it was yet. A lot of people suspect what it was, but we haven't heard for sure. But I wanted to get back into and listen to the rest of the testimony from Joe Kent, who is testifying here before Congress. So I'm going to finish playing this so we can hear
We've made
this.
significant progress under President Trump's leadership. We have the jihadis of ISIS and Al-Qaeda
Let me
on
fast
the
forward
run
it
in
here.
Iraq and Syria as a group of over 100,000 Afghans who were brought here during the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. These individuals, despite what has been reported, were not vetted properly to come into the United States. The individual terrorist who committed the attack in D.C., he was vetted to serve as a soldier in Afghanistan. The Biden administration essentially used his tactical level vetting as a ruse to bring him here and to bring him into our communities, and we've seen the tragic results of that. Now, that Afghan, that attacker, that terrorist, is just one of 88,000. We've identified 2,000 of that group of 88,000 who have ties to terrorist organizations. We're working right now, hand in hand with DHS and with the FBI, to run down this 2,000, the Afghans who came here under Allies Welcome, who have ties to terrorist organizations, and additionally the other 16,000 individuals with ties to terrorist organizations that Biden let into our country. That is probably the top terrorist threat that we face right now, and that doesn't include the individuals who came here illegally through the open border. That number, alarmingly, remains
So, ladies and gentlemen, it goes on for a few more seconds, but basically what Joe Kent is telling you as Vermonters and basically everybody in the country is we've got a big problem in this country. We have no idea how dangerous some of these people who we've let in currently are or currently could be. But we have somewhere in the ballpark of 18,000 known suspected terrorists in our country. That doesn't mean they're all here in Vermont, but if they're freely moving about the country, we don't know where they are and what their plans are. So I just wanted to point this out because it's time to be more vigilant. If you weren't already being vigilant, keeping your eyes open, being very situationally aware, it's time that you do that. You start practicing. If you don't know how to protect yourself better, find a friend or a family member who does, who can give you pointers. But we're free Americans, and we're only going to remain free if we can manage to protect ourselves. And one of the things that bothers me about what's happened in this country, basically in my lifetime, is we've ignored the most valuable part of our country, and we don't talk about it enough, especially with respect to the disaster that happened in Afghanistan with the withdrawal, okay, and other countries that we've been in. The idea, remember the term or the phrase nation building? Okay, what we did, or we tried to do, was a mistake. We're finding out, aren't we? We're finding out it was a big mistake. And the reason I'm saying this is, the point I'm trying to make is, our greatest export is not a product. It's a document. Our greatest export is our Constitution. Our greatest export is our American way of life. The freedoms we have as Americans, the shining light that is our country. The reason why people are coming here is our freedoms and our Constitution. And this is what we failed to realize in our quest to make our country safer in other countries while we were fighting in other countries. Democracy building. What is democracy building? We should be talking about constitutional republic building. That's what we should be talking about. We're a constitutional republic. We shouldn't be talking about, I just to give you an example, this past weekend on the 13th, I attended an event in the Capitol. There were school students. I believe they were all high schoolers. And I was sitting listening to a mock committee hearing and mock session in the chamber of the House. And some of the phrases and catchphrases that I heard, I think they were alarming to me. They were very alarming to me. Democracy was brought up. I never heard constitutional republic. I never heard the word republic. I heard students talking about how one of the bills that they wanted to propose was teaching more world history and less American history. Now, why would we want to do that? Our American history, as is the history of Vermont, it's rich with stories that, when taught to our students, who could then relay them, talk about them with others, including people who are new to this country, about some of the great things this country has done. Instead of, am I the only one who feels like the only thing anybody wants to bring up about our country is the bad? There's good, bad, and ugly everywhere in the world, and plenty of countries in the world. Why do we not hear about the good? Because there is definitely more good. I hope you would agree with me there, because why would people be trying to leave their country of origin to come to our country? So I don't want to get off too much on a tangent, because I want to cover a little bit more. And before I get into what happened in Australia, remember that in the UK also, they've given up what we have is a Second Amendment right. They've given up their right to keep and bear arms. And in the UK, they're in deep doo-doo as well. But I wanted to cover this. This article here is from thefederalist.com. Australia doesn't have a gun problem. It has an Islamist problem. At least 15 people were murdered at a Hanukkah celebration at Bondi Beach in Australia on Sunday after two alleged Islamic terrorists opened fire. One of the suspects, Sajid Akram, moved to Australia in 1998 on a student visa before becoming a permanent resident, while his son, Naveed Akram, was born in Australia, according to Sky News. Authorities previously investigated the son on the basis of being associated with alleged terrorists, but authorities ultimately determined there was no indication of any ongoing threat or threat of him engaging in violence, according to the report. Now, my question to you, ladies and gentlemen, is whoever did that report, do they still have a job after what happened? Prime Minister Anthony Albanese carefully stated in an interview that the attacker's anti-Semitic ideology was an extreme perversion of Islam. But authorities haven't released any official statement describing the motive. Even so, the truth is obvious. The terrorist attack resulted from a failure to confront the radical Islamic extremism that is inundating the West and was enabled by mass migration. We saw this attack against our National Guardsmen in D.C. Okay, now we have an attack at Brown University. We don't know what this attacker yelled before the shooting and the death, but I imagine we will eventually find out. University of Michigan economics professor Justin Wolfer, parroting a common left-wing talking point, said on X, "Just want to share with my American friends how the Australians respond to a shooting tragedy. Action rather than thoughts and prayers. but no draconian gun law would have stopped what authorities later discovered. Police said they found a range of IEDs and explosive devices in a car purportedly belonging to the suspects, adding that the suspects planned to use the explosive to inflict further damage, according to Sky News. In other words, even if firearms had been unavailable, mass casualties were still the objective. The method may be interchangeable, but the intent was not. The circumstances are hardly unique. Earlier this year, a suspected radical Islamist allegedly used Molotov cocktails to light Jewish demonstrators on fire in Boulder, Colorado. Last year, an Afghan national was arrested for allegedly plotting an election day terrorist attack on behalf of ISIS, and just recently a different Afghan national allegedly shot, well, we know he shot, not allegedly, and killed one National Guardsman and critically injured a second after being imported here by the Biden administration. And you just heard the recording of Joe Kent testifying before Congress about how bad or how dangerous the problem is in this country and in this state. In Europe, Paris canceled its iconic Champs-Élysées, I have no idea how that's pronounced, but I hope I didn't butcher it too bad, an open-air concert on New Year's Eve after authorities cited, quote, unpredictable crowd movements. Though, as the New York Post reported, critics loudly blamed France's open-door immigration policies. France's interior minister sent a letter to state officials warning of a, quote, very high terror threat at open-air Christmas markets from groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, according to the Post. At least 6 terrorist plots have been thwarted to date in 2025 in Paris. At least 6. In all cases, the problem wasn't the weapon, because the weapons changed. It was radical Islamists. But that's the truth that Australia's leaders and leftists refuse to acknowledge. Australia already has some of the strictest gun laws in the world. Pretending the attack was the result of loose gun regulations rather than a failure to address the importation and radicalization of violent Islamist extremists is not only dishonest, it's dangerous. If the lesson learned from this massacre is to further restrict the rights of lawful citizens while ignoring the ideological threat that motivated it, Australia won't have fewer attacks. It will have more. And the author is correct. And like I said, this is from The Federalist, dated December 15, 2025, Brianna Lyman. Okay? So the point of this whole show is going to be, ladies and gentlemen, you have the Second Amendment. Exercise it. Never give up your right to keep and bear arms. Never. It's your last line of hope. It truly, really is. So I just, with what's going on, not only in this country, we saw it in D.C., we saw it at Brown University. I don't know if you saw the statement from the mayor, the outgoing mayor of New York City, but he acknowledged the threat in New York City and basically all over the country. So I wanted to make sure that we covered this. I really, truly believe that even this session, there will be more, and I love this phrase, not really, but there will be more, quote, common sense gun control laws. Why do we not, especially in this state, we've seen the revolving door of bail, we hear about it all the time, with the petty crime that's no longer petty because of the cost of everything. So we need to make sure that somehow we find a way back to accountability for the safety and security of law-abiding citizens. So I just wanted to make sure that we covered this, ladies and gentlemen. This needs to be thought about. Sorry about that. It needs to be thought about. It needs to be constantly kept close to us. There are always forces that are trying to take away our rights of protection. So we've got to pay a few bills here. We'll be back in a few minutes. You're listening to Right Side Up. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to Right Side Up. My name is Mike Taglavia. We're going to switch gears from what we were talking about earlier in the other two segments. There's so much to talk about. I'd love to talk more about Second Amendment and Homeland Security and security of this state, but we have a lot to deal with. In this state, we are very, very badly, in my view, over-regulated, and that's one of the reasons why the economy in this state is stalled. We have an affordability issue that's compounded by high rates of taxation, but also very, very onerous regulations, especially on our farmers and our construction industry. Our restrictions with respect to efficiency are what is helping to stifle our economy. But I want to talk about food safety and farming for a minute. I think that farming should be one of our priorities when it comes to easing regulations so we can actually promote more farms in this state. We obviously need more. But this article caught my eye. This is dates back December 10th, 2025 by John Clark from Small Farm Republic, but I think I originally saw this on Vermont Daily Chronicle. Let's see. Chinese toxins in U.S. barbecues, a wary eye on the food supply. Let's see. In 2006 and 7, Americans' pet cats and dogs began dying mysteriously from kidney failure. The mystery is not long-lived. Authorities quickly discern the cause to be pet foods laced with a chemical called melamine, or some combination of chemicals that likely included melamine and cyanuric acid. This was a tragic way for animals to die. The FDA reported that more than 10,000 complaints about sickened pets. Thousands of cats and dogs were killed by the tainted pet foods. Melamine is an industrial chemical not generally accepted as a food ingredient, so how did it end up in U.S. pet foods? The problem traces to China, where surplus melamine and cyanuric acid became widely used as adulterants in feedstock and baby formula to mislead quality testing that measures protein content by assessing nitrogen levels. In the case of human baby formula, infants in China began dying of kidney failure, leading eventually to court trials and the public executions of two culprits found to have deliberately adulterated Chinese baby formula. Americans import more and more ultra-processed foods from China every year, but its track record on product safety is hardly comforting. The contamination of U.S. pets likely stemmed from wheat, gluten, and rice protein used to manufacture popular brand-name pet foods, including Purina's Alpo brand and products under the healthy-sounding brand name Natural Balance. Contaminated corn gluten was blamed for a similar scourge of pet mortalities in South Africa. The globalized food system is susceptible to potential abuses for profit, such as the tainting of pet foods with industrial chemicals. The more telling and alarming part of the pet food story, though, is what the mainstream media didn't much discuss: subsequent contamination of human foods. I dug into this food trail years ago because as a farmer and business advisor, I immediately suspected something else would go awry. I investigated the pathway to pigs, and sure enough, that's where some of the rejected dog and cat food ended up. Corporations love to convert costly liabilities to saleable assets. At least 6,000 pigs in 6 U.S. states were potentially fed melamine-tainted, recalled pet foods. A poultry farm was also supplied with tainted pet food. It appears that some of the tainted pigs entered the human food chain before the risk was discovered. One bizarre statement that pretty well sums up the U.S. human food supply ran like this. Quote, the California Department of Health Services is recommending that pigs in question not be consumed, but California State Public Health Officer Dr. Mark Horton considers the health risks minimal if the pork has already been eaten. Translation: you shouldn't eat this pork, but if you already did, no worries. Much like the government hides evidence of adverse childhood reactions to vaccines because they might cause parents to become, quote, vaccine hesitant, fears that U.S. pork might be tainted with kidney-destroying feed additives could upset the price of pork bellies on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. This is the common refrain and moral hazard in U.S. food systems. Cover up the risks so people keep buying and eating things they wouldn't otherwise. This is what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has repeatedly warned Americans about, complaining of, quote, captured regulatory agencies, end quote, that serve their corporate masters rather than the American people who pay their salaries. Recall in the movie Jaws that the town of Amity Island's mayor downplays the risk of shark attacks because the news could destroy summer tourist traffic and undermine local businesses. That reflects what the modern American food supply looks like. Don't tell people the risks of what they are munching on from their local fast food drive-thru. It could hurt business. If toxic pet food that kills dogs and cats is averted to feed pigs and their meat is then fed to humans, what else is making its way through the increasingly industrialized international food system to America's dinner plates? So, I know this might sound a little bit far-reaching, but in a state where we used to have thousands more farmers than we do now, and thousands more small farms than we do currently, why are we not, as a state, trying to find ways to reduce regulation for farmers, to make it so that, like the label on John Clark's website, Small Farm Republic, so small farms can actually still be prosperous, be profitable? How many times have you heard somebody talk about large factory farms? Well, most of the farmers have expanded to a point where someone would call them a factory farm because that the farmers pretty much understand that if they don't make their farms larger, is like dairy farmers, if they don't milk more and more cows, that they are going to risk being regulated right out of business. So we know that we're overregulating our farms. And why would I say that? Well, we're watching our farm population die. We're watching our farming industry die because farmers have decided to call it quits and reap the last harvest that most farmers do, and that's by selling out and taking the cash. A lot of them wind up doing that. So we need to find ways to encourage farmers to stay on the farm. We need to find ways like, I believe there's still in a bill in the legislature, and it refers to logging industry as well, but some of the trucking, some of the equipment that farmers have to buy, the taxes on them are extremely onerous. So being able to buy the heavy equipment that could cost in the hundreds of thousands of dollars each piece, for a farmer or a logger not to have to pay tax on that equipment would be a huge savings for them and maybe be what helps to keep them viable. Between the agriculture industry and the wood products industry in this state, we would be in a much better financial state. Right now, what do we have for an economy? We have service economy and we have tourist economy. Tourist economy, apparently, I was just reading something, I can't remember the number, but it was a pretty large number in the billions. I forgot how many. I seem to remember something like $10 billion or more, but I can't remember the number. But that's great that we have a tourist industry that's that large. But why not have a production economy as well? Why not have three ways to have people be able to make money by producing something other than having a labor economy and a tourist economy. How better to buffer your economy and the economic growth of a state and the economic stability of a state by having more options for people to, number one, stay here, and number two, for them to move here. Even in the small neighborhood, the small town where I live, there were incredible number of farms, dairy farms, small dairy farms, within probably 2 or 3 miles of my home, and they're no longer there because it became so difficult for farmers to remain profitable. And it is a labor of love. I mean, go to a dairy farm and watch and look and see what the farmer does on a daily basis. Maybe talk to one of them. Find out how many hours a dairy farmer puts in, especially if it's a small family-run operation. And even if it's not, because the cows need to be milked, and I've seen the automation that we have now. It's incredible. I didn't even realize that they had this stuff. But there still needs to be somebody who's observing this equipment and making sure that there are no breakdowns in the system. So if we're going to keep the Vermont that we all know and love viable economically, we need to be, like I was talking about in the first two segments, we need to be vigilant because we know of the risks that are out there. And thankfully, we are a constitutional carry state. But we also need to know what the risks regulatorily we have. And are we going to regulate ourselves right out of business? I go back to one of the comments that I found really disturbing about Vermont. It's really pretty, but what else is there? Why does it need to be that way? Why? It doesn't need to be that way. We have a lot to offer. Vermont is known worldwide for a number of things. Why should we not restore some of the things that have fallen by the wayside, that have suffered because of regulation, like the wood products industry and our farming and our farmers and our farm families? Why not celebrate them and find ways to be more generous to them so that they can make a wage and their family members can make a wage and a profit, to make them want to keep coming back and getting up in the morning as early as they do and staying up for those late hours that they absolutely have to do if they're going to keep their livestock healthy, especially in the cold winter days like we have now. So we need to be mindful of the big picture. The big picture. There's not just one thing, one silver bullet that is going to fix what we have as far as the problems in this beautiful Green Mountain state. But if we can identify what they are, and we've pretty much identified that, at least here on Right Side Up. There are a lot of people who know what the problems are, and they are fixable problems. I and probably most of you in the listening audience know they're fixable problems. But we have to have the right people in the right places. So we're coming up on the end of the show again, unfortunately. Again, like I said, I hope you enjoy what we talk about. But I just want to, one of the reasons why I do this every week is because I want to make sure that we're all informed. I want to make sure that we continue to talk with our friends and neighbors. Find out what's bothering your friends and neighbors, and then find out who in a place of power, with the ability to make it better, who they are, and are they willing to make it better. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of another show. Remember, stay safe, Stay informed. Listen to Right Side Up.